We're going to look at James 5 together. If you're wondering if I forgot about the offering, shame on you. I'm a Baptist pastor. Of course I didn't forget about the offering. We're going to do the offering at the end of the service today, and we have a special a special cause that we're going to give to, so I'll explain that to you after the sermon. But just so you're not worried and distracted the whole service. If you'll turn to James chapter 5, we want to look at James chapter 5, specifically verses 1 to 11 this morning. I'm going to begin just by reading that passage for us. James 5:1. Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches have rotted, your garments are moth-eaten, your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. This is the James we know and love, right? I mean, he tells it like it is. You have laid up treasure in the last days. Behold, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered the righteous person, and he doesn't resist you. Be patient, therefore, brothers, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the door. As an example of suffering and patience, brothers, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Behold, we consider those blessed who remain steadfast. You've heard of the steadfastness of Job, and you've seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. I want to look at verses 7 to 11 first. If you read through there, as we're reading Scripture, remember one of the things we're looking for is repetition. We want to see if a word is mentioned over and over again. The author's trying to get our attention. He's trying to tell us something. Any words in there that you noticed were repeated? Yeah, I heard it over there. Patience. And then at the end, there's another word, persevere or steadfastness. Talks about Job, and the steadfastness of Job is the word the ESV has. You'll notice probably, depending on what translation, King James, or the New King James, or the NIV, or the ESV, a lot of them have different words. And the reason is it's not a real clear concept where it's just like one word in English is a perfect fit for the Greek word. The two words, so in your notes, the theme of 5, 7 to 11 is pretty obvious. It comes up over and over again, and so I just kind of put the two words together, patient endurance. Patient endurance. Patient being 4 times in the first couple verses, and then endurance being twice there in verse 11. And they're neat words. Patience, let me see here. I'm up in front of everybody, and now my mind goes blank. Patience is macrothumeo. We talked a couple of weeks ago about micro and macro. You remember micro is kind of a real small picture, and macro is the big picture. So macro means big or large or long, and then thumeo is actually anger or wrath or suffering. So you've got macro meaning long and thumeo meaning suffering. So guess what word that's similar to? Long suffering. But we don't really use the word long suffering anymore. And so the ESV goes with patience. But I kind of resist the word patience because when I think of the word patience, I think of like someone who doesn't mind waiting in line, like someone who could stand still and wait patiently. And this idea of macrothumeo is long suffering. It means that you can go through a lot before you give up. You can go through a lot before you blow up. That as you endure things, you continue to endure and endure and endure. You continue to suffer and suffer and suffer a long time, and it doesn't get to you. You're strong, you're tough, you have endurance to go through a lot of suffering. And then endurance, that one we talked about in chapter 1 is hupomeno. Hupo means to be under, and then meno it means to remain. So that means that you can stay under for a long time. And remember in chapter 1 I talked about the illustration of Daylin at the pool. She loves that jet that just beats down on her and stands there and takes it and takes it and takes it. That's the idea, is that with patience is long suffering, and then endurance is that you can stay under suffering, and you can stay under and stay under and stay under, and you don't quit. You don't give up. So it's interesting that those two words are the theme of patient endurance, because when people talk about Christianity and let me present the Christian life to you, let me tell you what it's about, let me tell you what's important in the Christian life, they don't often say what you're going to really need, what you're going to really want if you're going to live the Christian life is you're going to have to suffer a long time, and you're going to have to stay under difficult times and not give up. We often want to put all the good stuff at the front end. So Christ came to give us peace and love and joy. And what's another fruit of the Spirit? Patience, long suffering. It's one of the key concepts. In fact, if you'll turn your bulletin or your handout over to the back side of that, one of the key concepts, it was surprising to me as I looked up this word patience or long suffering, how central it is to the New Testament's vision of what it means to be a Christian. If you would ask someone, describe to me the Christian life, what does a Christian life look like? We talk about kindness, and we talk about gentleness, and we talk about love. But one of the key concepts, every time you have this list of this is what a Christian should look like, this is what a Christian should look like, this is what a Christian should look like, guess what is in almost every single one of those lists? This word macrothumeo, long suffering. A Christian has to be someone who can suffer for a long time. Let me just walk you through the back of your handout there. First of all, it says that God is long suffering. Isn't that interesting? I thought that was really interesting. We serve a God who suffers a long time, who has this character quality that he will go through a lot of suffering without letting it get to him, without giving up. Guess who puts him through the most suffering? Me, you, the person next to you, the person behind you, the person in front of you. We put God, we push his patience. We push his endurance of how much God can you put up with? How much God can you take? And he suffers, and he suffers with us. He doesn't give up on us. And that's one of the things we love about our God, right? When we have Thanksgiving time where we share blessings and we talk about God, every Thanksgiving service, one of the key things that's mentioned is I love God's faithfulness. I love that God doesn't give up on me. I love God's second chances. I love that God doesn't give up on me. I love that God doesn't quit on me. I love God's grace and his forgiveness. Why does he have grace and forgiveness? Because he's long suffering. Because he suffers with us a long time. And so Paul really got that. In fact, that verse in 1 Timothy, Paul says, complete patience was shown to me. Above anyone else, God showed me complete patience, his long suffering. And so then Paul's whole vision of ministry was shaped by that. So that when Paul said, this is what it means to do ministry, you have to be long suffering. As he talked about his own ministry, he said, you've seen my patience, you've seen my long suffering. When he talked to Timothy about what he should do in ministry, he said, imitate my long suffering. Be long suffering with the people that you work with, the people that you minister to. And then he goes through the whole list of Christian virtues. In 1 Corinthians 13, when we talk about love, love is what? Love is patient. Love is long suffering. And then later it uses that other word, hupomeno, to stay under. And it says, love endures all things. Love stays under. Even when it pounds down and pounds down and pounds down on you, love stays under. It remains. Part of Paul's prayer for the Colossians in 1:11 is that they would be strengthened with all hupomeno, to endure, and patience, long suffering, with joy. Isn't that a beautiful trilogy? I want you to be strengthened by the power of God's might. I want you to be strengthened with this ability to suffer a long time and to remain under for a long time and to do those things with joy. That's something you have to pray for God to give us. It's not something that comes naturally to us. The fruit of the Spirit we already mentioned: love, joy, peace, long suffering, patience. The spiritual clothing in Colossians 3, he says, put off all these deeds of the flesh and put on, and one of the things we're supposed to put on is patience, long-suffering. And then in Ephesians chapter 4, he says, walk worthy of the calling with which you have been called, with this, with that, and with patience. It is a central concept of the New Testament that the life of the Christian has to have patience, long-suffering as part of it. Now, if you're a thinking person, and the room is full of thinking people today, right? If you're a thinking person and someone says to you, for the life that you're being invited to live, you're going to need long-suffering, what does that tell you about the life you're being invited to live? It's going to be hard. We are invited into a challenging walk. Again, sometimes the popular message today is that God wants to make your life easy and successful and wants to bless you and wants to make things great for you. But we call it the Christian life, right? And the Christian life is focused on who? It's in the word, Christ. And how was Christ's life? Did Christ live an easy life? Did Christ live a blessed life? Yes, he lived a blessed life. Did Christ live a comfortable life? No. Did Christ live a successful life in the world's standards? He died. He was killed. So we're called to follow someone, and the model for us, the forerunner, the person who's running ahead of us and saying, this is the path you're supposed to follow, we ought to be able to tell just by his life what our life is going to look like. And then he made it explicitly clear. He said, the world hated me, and if you follow me, it's going to hate you. Remember the parable of the sower? He said, the sower's going to throw seed down, and the seed's going to go in, and there's going to be some soil that's going to go in, it's going to sprout up right away, but then it's going to hit rocks. And the rocks are going to make it die away. And then he explains that to his disciples. He says the rocks are difficult times. There's going to come difficult times, and there are people who will not have what? Patience. Yes, Grayson. Oh, I love it when kids are with me. That is awesome. There are going to be people who don't have long suffering, who get excited about the gospel, who get excited about Jesus, who are all gung-ho until the first rock hits them, or until they hit the first rock. And then they give up and they abandon it and they quit. And Jesus says, in Luke, he says there are others where the seed's going to go down and it's going to bear fruit with patience, with long suffering. So, surprisingly, this is a theme throughout most of the New Testament, even though we don't talk about it much. I was talking to Daylin. We've lost something about, you realize Christianity came from the Middle East. It's not a Western religion. And we've lost this part. We were watching Survivor, and there's a Vietnamese guy named Thai, who's a Buddhist. And they had endurance trials, or what are they, challenges. And he won these endurance challenges over these great big muscular Westerners. Because, and part of it was he was saying these Buddhist prayers to himself. Over and over. As he was suffering, he was saying these Buddhist prayers. And he just kept enduring and enduring and enduring. And one by one, this great strong person fell out, and this strong person fell out, and this tall person fell out. And this little Vietnamese man just kept going and going and going. A lot of these Eastern religions have kind of held on to this concept of long suffering. That we, as we've westernized Christianity, it's like we've left that behind, this ability to stay under, this ability to suffer a long time and not quit and not give up. So we ought to learn from the theme of long suffering throughout the New Testament that the Christian life is not a downhill sprint with the wind at our backs. I love downhill sprints. I'm good at those. I can do well. Seattle and I ran in the Landkreislauf, the county relay run. And we got a leg that was up for 1 kilometer and then down for, I think, like 300 meters. We suffered a long time. Long suffering. Up, 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 up. And then we got to the top, and the whole time I'm encouraging my son. I'm exhorting him. Come on, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. We get to the top, and you know what that little dog did? All of a sudden, I'm like, we can do this, Seattle, and he takes off sprinting down the end, beats me by like 5-10 seconds. All of a sudden, the downhill sprint is the fun part of the run. And sometimes that's the view we give people, is Christian life it's all downhill. God is gently blowing at your back, and you just run down the hill to Jesus. You don't need long suffering to run downhill. You don't need long suffering when the wind's at your back. The whole point of long suffering throughout the New Testament is telling us that we're not being invited to run a downhill sprint. We're being invited to a hilly marathon in the rain. And I say hilly, it's not all uphill. There are downhills and there are uphills. Sometimes the rain is pleasant. Sometimes you love a little mist because it feels great, it cools you off. And sometimes the rain is a downpour and it's like, dear God, please make it stop. That is the life of the Christian. That is the life, that is the race that you're being invited to run with Christ, behind Christ, following our forerunner. And then the next thing I want you to fill out, at some point in the race, everyone has to ask themselves the difficult, hard question. Imagine you're running uphill and you're laboring and trying to get up this hill and trying to keep going. As James says, be patient, brothers. Endure, establish your heart. So you're trying to be patient, you're trying to suffer long, you're going step by step, and every step hurts. Every step, your lungs are burning. And then you look over to the side and you see people in lounge chairs drinking lemonade and just enjoying themselves. And then you look over this side and there's some people diving into a swimming pool and they're having a great time and having a party. And you begin to think, wow, I'm in the wrong place. That person has it right and that person has it right, but what am I doing here running up this hill? And spiritually, at some point, all of us struggle with that. Or if you haven't yet, you're going to. Because God calls us to this hilly marathon. And inevitably, at some point, as you're running up a hill and life is difficult and the Christian walk is painful, you're going to see friends who have nothing and want nothing to do with God who seem to be having a great time in life. They're not running up a hill. They're not laboring for breath. They're not in pain. They're relaxing and enjoying themselves. They're drinking lemonade and sitting by the pool and having a party. And you're dishonest with yourself if at some point you don't say, what is wrong with this picture? Because if God is good and if God is powerful and I've given my life to follow God, then why is my life so painful and difficult, and why is their life so pleasant and so fun and so easy? So the hard question is, why is life so much easier for those ungodly people? And I don't mean those ungodly as in the general ungodly people, but usually we have specific people. We have specific people in our lives. I remember specifically one of my best friends from high school. I took a path of trying to follow God. He took a path of not really trying to follow God. And I can remember visiting him, and everything just seemed to be going great for him. Life seemed to be easy for him. And it was at a time that life was difficult and painful for me. And just wrestling with God, why is it harder to follow you than to rebel against you? Why is my life worse than his life? Why aren't I running downhill with the wind at my back? Why isn't he the one running uphill, laboring for breath and with his lungs on fire? And James addresses this because it seems like these people, there are rich people around them who are living seemingly high, living easy, living great. So he says in verse 1, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for the miseries that are coming upon you." And James speaks almost like an Old Testament prophet. He proclaims woe upon them. We talked last week, a lot of James is written to pull someone back, to say, look at what you're doing and correct it. This is not written to pull the rich back. The idea is that the rich are never actually going to get this letter. This is written to curse the rich, so that the people who are running uphill and are suffering say, you don't want to envy them. It looks like they're well off. It looks like they're doing well, but you don't want to be in their place. So he talks about three different things. He says, your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver have corroded, and their corrosion will be evidence against you and will eat your flesh like fire. When he says your riches have rotted and your garments are moth-eaten, what does that remind you of? Yes, Matthew 6. His half-brother, Jesus. Remember Jesus' teachings? Do not store up your treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. So much of James you can trace back to the teachings of Jesus. He's saying, you have stored up your treasures and they're being destroyed and they're all here. And then the very last one is right at the end of verse 3. You have laid up treasure in the last days. You've stored up treasure in a time when the treasure is about to be no good. Being here in Germany, in Europe, we deal with two currencies. So we have dollars and euros, right? You're always worried, do I have euros? Do I have dollars? And exchanging and back and forth. Imagine if I told you with 100% certainty that next week on Thursday, this coming Thursday, the dollar is going to plummet and be worthless. What would make sense to do with your dollars? To change them into something else. To convert them to something that will hold its value past Thursday. If you know that the dollar is about to plummet, you want to put it into euros, you want to put it into gold, you want to find something that will not lose its value on Thursday. And that's the point that Jesus was making was, listen, everything you own is going to lose its value. So convert it into something that won't lose its value. Exchange it for something eternal. And now James is saying, you know that Thursday is coming, and instead of exchanging it and investing in eternal things, you continue to store up dollars and dollars and dollars, and you think you're rich because you have lots of dollars, but I'm telling you, Thursday is coming and all of your dollars are going to be worthless. You're storing up treasure in a time when your treasure is about to become worthless. So then he says you're hoarding wealth rather than investing it. And then he says you're defrauding people rather than rewarding them. Says in verse 4, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, are crying out against you. And the cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord of hosts. People who use others to get ahead rather than trying to reward others for their work. Does that ever happen? I mean, it may be as explicit as this, as having someone work and then just refusing to pay them for their work. Or it may be claiming someone else's work so that you get credit for it and robbing them of the credit for their idea or their work or their time. Defrauding rather than rewarding workers. And then the last one in verse 5 and 6. You have lived on the earth in luxury and in self-indulgence. You've met all of your needs. All of your needs are met, and then you've gone on to meet all of your wants, and all of your wants are met, and then you just begin to meet your whims of just, you know, I think I'll throw some money here. I think I'll throw some money there. This reminds us of Jesus' parable of Lazarus and the rich man, remember? Lazarus sits at the gate of the rich man. The rich man eats, and Lazarus hopes to find crumbs that fall off of his table. Hopes to find the waste that the rich man can't eat or doesn't want to eat. That's what Lazarus is hoping to eat and hoping to live off of. So James is telling us, don't look at the rich and envy them. As you're suffering and as you're working to get up a hill, don't look at the people in the swimming pool, don't look at the people in the lounge chairs and think, oh man, I wish I could be there. Because they are hoarding their wealth rather than investing it. They're defrauding people rather than rewarding them. And they're wasting rather than sharing. So this message really isn't written to us, but but we ought to take pause and say, does it apply to us? What are you doing with your wealth? See, we call it saving. I'm being responsible, and I'm saving, and I'm saving, and I'm saving, and I'm saving. You know what's interesting about savings? No matter what mark you set, once you get there, it feels like I haven't quite saved enough. I need to save a little bit more. I need to save a little bit more because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's coming next year, and I don't know about this, and I don't know about that. So I need a little more retirement. I need a little more savings. I need a little more investment. Are you defrauding or are you rewarding the people around you? The people that you work with, the people that work beside you, under you, above you? Are you trying to make them successful, or are you trying to be successful on their backs? Are you wasting or are you sharing? As missionaries, we have people, families that support us, and through living beside them and walking beside them, we know that they're supporting us because they're living more frugally, sometimes even than we are. That they're saying, I'm going to not do this. One of our friends, we went to their house, and they had like basic, not even basic cable, they had like the antenna, you know, where you get whatever the little rabbit ears will get. We're like, wow, okay. But instead of paying for cable, they were investing that in other people. Now, how much do you waste? Not even saying I'm going to go without something I need. Even if God says you can meet all of your needs, and then you've got your wants, and a lot of us take care of all of our wants as well. Where it gets to be Christmas, it gets to be birthday, and you can't think of anything that you really even want because you've already bought everything that you want. Or maybe you're just not materialistic. That's great, maybe. But what if you did without something that you wanted and shared it instead? What if you just stopped wasting and saved what you were wasting, what I'm wasting, what we're wasting, and shared that instead? This is what James is looking at the rich, and he's saying they're hoarding rather than investing in eternity. They're defrauding rather than rewarding people. They're wasting their stuff on self-indulgence rather than seeing the needs around them and sharing with it. And we ought to take pause and say, does that describe us? Look at one of the last things he says about them at the end of verse 5. You have fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. Remember, he says, you've treasured up things in the last days when it's about to be worthless. And he says, you've fattened your hearts in a day of slaughter. Now come back with me to this mental image of us running up a hill and getting tired and struggling for breath and looking at this person, looking at that person, relaxing and living this cushiony life. Do you know what they do to animals that they want to slaughter? I know this is a little gruesome. They feed them a lot, and they don't let them exercise. They don't want them to move at all, because when you move, what happens? You burn fat and you create muscle. And for an animal that you want to slaughter, you want lots of fatty meat and no muscle. So the picture is, as we're running up this hill and seeing this person sitting by their pool and this person relaxing in a lounge chair, James is saying you don't want to be there. You want to be running up a hill because you're burning fat and you're creating muscle. And those are the animals that don't get slaughtered. You want to be the skinny, muscly animal. You don't want to be the fat one that's sitting by the pool and not exercising. They are fattening themselves in a day of slaughter. And I don't know about you, but when I think about the image that way, all of a sudden I'm like, God, thank you for this hill. I'm going to run a little harder. I'm going to run a little faster because I want to lose fat. When the day of slaughter comes, I want to be a skinny, wiry little animal. I don't want to be one of the ones sitting by the pool. I don't want to be one of the ones drinking a lemonade. I want to be one of the ones who's been working my way up the hills, who's been running down the hills, who's been working in the rain, who's been suffering long and remaining under. So James says, don't envy them. Don't look at them when you ask yourself, why is life so much easier for that ungodly person or that ungodly person. It's because God is not preparing you for the slaughter. You are not preparing yourself for the slaughter. The telos of the rich that live for now. It's the same in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. It's the same in Jesus' parable of the rich fool. Remember? You fool, you've stored up barns full of food, and you've invested nothing in eternity. He reminds us of their telos. They are fattening themselves for the slaughter. I put in your notes, Psalm 49 and 73 are fantastic psalms that go hand in hand with this passage. We don't have time to look at them today, but read Psalm 49 and 73 this week at home. Not right now. Read them at home this week. Speaking of telos, wouldn't it be neat if James came back to that concept? Remember in chapter 1, he was talking about the telos, the goal, the destination. Did you catch anything at the end of our reading? Chapter 5, verse 11. Behold, we consider those blessed. You're happy. You're one of the lucky ones if you're one of the ones running up the hill. If you're one of the ones suffering a long time. Hebrews 12 says, if you're enduring chastening, if God is disciplining you, it's because he loves you. Count yourself blessed. We consider them blessed who remain steadfast. You have heard of the steadfastness, the long-suffering, or the endurance of Job, and you've seen the purpose of the Lord. One guess. You get one guess what the word purpose is. You've seen the telos of the Lord. You've seen where God is taking people. That's what the Old Testament shows us. This is my telos for those who follow me. This is where I take them. I take them up hills. I take them down hills. I take them through rain. I take them through storms. But eventually, I take them to a beautiful place. Eventually, there is fruit waiting for the farmer who is enduring and who is patient. It says, the telos of the Lord is compassion and mercy. You've seen the purpose of the Lord. You've seen, the word is telos, of the Lord. How the Lord is compassionate and merciful. There is precious fruit coming. You remember that verse from verse 7? Be patient, therefore, brothers. Don't stop running up the hill. Don't give up. There's precious fruit. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, being patient about it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also be patient. Be long-suffering. And then he says, do not grumble against one another, brothers, so that you may not be judged. The judge is standing at the door. So the last kind of exhortations are, don't give up and don't grumble. Yes, there are some hills that are incredibly difficult to get up, where you feel like they just go on and on and on. Don't give up. One of the best ways to get up those hills, Seattle and I encouraging each other, pushing each other, saying, come on, we can do this. We can do this. Don't walk yet. We can run a little bit further. We can keep going. But what sometimes happens as you're running together is you start encouraging each other, and then eventually you start grumbling against each other. You start bickering with each other. And James is saying, as you're going through these difficult periods, don't give up, don't stop running, and don't start grumbling. Don't start fighting with the people that are running beside you. The judge is standing at the door. The race is much closer to being over than you think. It goes by quickly. Just one step, one step, one step. Just don't stop taking those steps. So I don't know where you're at spiritually. I don't know what part of the race you're on. I know some of you, your loved ones are gone, and gone for months. And it seems like that's a pretty long hill. Don't give up. Continue to hold on. There's a verse 8, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Strengthen yourself and keep going.